Good afternoon from London. It's a bright, summery July afternoon here in London. And hello to all dear comrades, friends and supporters from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, the chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche, chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, an official delegate of KFA for the UK, and of course the owner of this very self-same channel, Songam 007, the militant voice of Songam and Juche in the UK, defending people's Korea with no ifs or buts. Today, July 27th, is Victory Day in People's Korea. So today, in my video, I'm going to talk about that. On the 27th of July 1953, General Mark Clark, the commander of the US forces in Korea, which were falsely claimed to be UN forces, but that is another long story, signed the Korean Armistice Agreement, an agreement which included provision that US troops should be drawn from Korea, an agreement which the US later reneged on. Clark lamented later that, and I quote, "It capped my career, but it was a cap without a feather in it. In carrying out the instructions of my government, I gained the unenviable distinction of being the first US commander in the history of the United States Army to sign an armistice without winning a victory." End of quotation. And that is from the book From the Danube to the River Amnok. The infamous anti-communist senator J.R. McCarthy, the "Are you or have you ever been" character, remarked, and I quote, "We suffered a serious defeat in Korea, and I've often myself wondered whether Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, the two US communists who were executed on trumped-up charges on the 19th of June 1953, were in fact executed as scapegoats for the US defeat in the war." The US could not hide their defeat in Korea as much as they tried. The US did not hold victory parades. In fact, the Korean War, as it is called in the US and the lands of the US Empire, which include Britain, is often referred to as the Unknown War or Forgotten War. Forgotten and unknown because the US imperialists wanted to forget about their defeat and for people not to know about it. Also, the US imperialists wanted to hide the horrendous genocidal atrocities such as massacres of civilians, saturation bombing, and the use of biological and chemical weapons. They wanted to hide this from future generations and for it to be erased from history books. But truth is a very stubborn thing indeed. In People's Korea, July 27th is celebrated as a victory day, and the war is not called the Korean War, but the Victorious Fatherland Liberation War, because it was not a war between Koreans, but a war between the Korean people and the US imperialists and their puppets, stooges, and lackeys, as well as a war to liberate the territory of the DPRK that had been invaded by the US imperialists. The great leader, Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, who had led the Korean people and commanded the Korean People's Army, said, and I quote, "The Fatherland Liberation War waged by our people was a fierce anti-imperialist, anti-US struggle against the Allied forces of world reaction headed by US imperialism and a bitter class struggle against the enemies of the people. End of quotation. Indeed, the Fatherland Liberation War was a fierce class struggle between the Korean people and class enemies such as former capitalists, landlords, usurers, and bureaucrats in the northern half of Korea, and against the regime of capitalist landlords and bureaucrats in South Korea. It was a war to defend socialism, to defend the socialist camp against the aggression of US imperialism, which aimed to quote unquote roll back communism. Led by the great leader, Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, the Korean people won a great victory. When the war started on the 25th of June 1950, few people expected the DPRK to survive, let alone win the war. The DPRK was only 2 years old at the time, having been founded in September 1948. The DPRK's population was less than 1/15 of the size of the US population. The US was the victor of the Second World War. They had emerged as the strongest imperialist power and the king of the capitalist world, unlike other imperialist countries such as the UK and Germany. The mainland territory of the US had not been bombed. Its armed forces were formidable, having defeated Nazi Germany in Europe and imperialist Japan. From 1948, the US started increasing military expenditure. During the war, the DPRK not only faced the war machine of the US Empire and the South Korean puppet forces, but troops from 15 satellite countries, including Britain and France, and also Japan, participated in the war in secret, in some cases wearing South Korean puppet uniforms. Even the Chiang Kai-shek forces were dragged into the war. Basically, the Fatherland Liberation War was akin to the biblical story of David and Goliath, with the DPRK being in the role of the boy David and the US in the role of the giant Goliath. The Korean People's Army and the people of the DPRK, led by the great leader, Comrade Kim Il-sung, based themselves on the Juche-orientated military theory that the outcome of war is not simply determined by weapons, but by those who hold those weapons, humans. This is an application of the core philosophical concept of Juche, that people are the masters of everything and decide everything. The great revolutionary leader, Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, later explained, and I quote, "We must solve our problems no matter who is helping us and what help we get. Victory must be won by our own strength." End of quotation. While giving on-the-spot guidance to a munitions factory late in February 1953, Comrade Kim Il-sung stressed the need for workers there to have a Juche-orientated stand and revolutionary spirit of self-reliance, that the Korean people should achieve victory in the war at any cost by their own efforts. The KPA, commanded by great Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, used new, original and Juche-based tactics, such as going over to an immediate counter-offensive, the use of tunnel warfare, and using ordinary weapons to shoot down planes, just to name a few. And of course, the Vietnamese people later applied the tactic of tunnel warfare in their war against the US. To cut a long story short, the KPA and the Korean people, led by Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, fought back hard against the US imperialists, displaying unparalleled heroism and sacrifice. The defeat suffered by the US was massive. The US's own narrow and curtailed statistics for its losses in the war showed that it lost the same number in 3 years in Korea as it did in 10 years in Vietnam and also uh, Afghanistan and Iraq. Overall, the US imperialists lost over 1,567,128 of its troops, including 498 US soldiers, over 1 million South Korean puppet troops, and over 30,000 troops of its satellite states. And these were either killed, wounded, or captured. Over 12,000 aeroplanes, including B-29s, were shot down, damaged, or captured. Over 7,000 guns, over 3,000 tanks and armoured cars were lost, and 564 warships and vessels, including the heavy cruiser Baltimore and the flagship of the US 7th Fleet, the Surrey, was sunk or damaged. The loss suffered by the US imperialists was nearly 2.3 times greater than what they had suffered in the 4 years of the Pacific War during World War II. It was an appalling loss, a military disaster, and a serious defeat unprecedented in the US history of war. Field Marshal Costa Gomes, who had been the president of Portugal after the 1974 Carnation Revolution, but more significantly had actually been a former NATO Deputy Supreme Commander and the head of Portuguese armed forces in Macao during the 1950s, said that the great leader, Comrade Kim Il-sung, thwarted all the plans that had been worked out by the US generals and military policy planners. Thus, in the Fatherland Liberation War, commanded by the great leader, Comrade Kim Il-sung, reactionary bourgeois military theory was smashed by the Juche-orientated revolutionary military strategy and theory. The Fatherland Liberation War ended in victory due to the Juche-orientated military tactics of the great leader, Supreme Commander Marshal Kim Il-sung, and the heroism and self-sacrifice of the Korean people. Eternal victory will always belong to the Korean people. Long may the tradition of victory continue in People's Korea. Glory to the Korean People's Army. Glory to the memory of the great leader, Generalissimo Kim Il-sung. Long live People's Korea. Long live Juche. Long live respected Marshal Kim Jong-un. Thank you very much for listening to this video and being here today. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel Songam 007, please hit the subscribe button, and also to our affiliated channel, Korean Friendship Association of the UK. And please, please, please share content from the channel as widely as you can. We'll be aiming to upload new content in the coming weeks. You can help us defend People's Korea with no ifs or buts in a number of ways. I think, first of all, by coming to our events, both in real life and online. These will be advertised on Telegram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, you can donate money to KFA UK or to myself. And I think it's also useful and good to read the books that I've written or have been co-written by myself and others in KFA UK, or collectively written. There'd be a link in the description. But I thank everybody for watching today. Please enjoy DPRK Victory Day. See you all again soon. Goodbye.